Thank you all. Back in 1984, I was a brand new, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed graduate student just entering the university. After having worked and been out in the real world, I thought it was much more fun being in school. And so I returned to school, and I'll tell you what, when you come back to school after working for a while, it's a lot more fun. You really appreciate things. Well, it turned out that I got to put down my choices for who I wanted to be my mentor. My first choice mentor had just resigned from the university. He went off to go with one of his grad students to start some newfangled thing called Google. Who knew? My second choice didn't pan out either. He was up to the gills with graduate students. He couldn't take one more. So I thought, okay, well, let's go down to my third choice, some guy named Felix. Felix, what kind of a name is that? So there I was sitting in his office, sitting down in my chair on one side of the desk, and Felix was on the other, and he was a really laid-back guy. He has a nice, closely trimmed beard, just the prototypical Stanford professor. Bright, sparkling eyes, thinning hair, kind of had a deadhead shirt on, tie-dyed, and he wore Birkenstocks with socks. Anyway, he was a laid-back kind of guy, and we talked about a lot of things. He was interested in my background because I had done a lot of computer modeling and simulation work. He was an expert in biomechanics, in muscle and tendon. And he wanted to expand and say, Gary, why don't you join me? We'll start a research group, and we'll start modeling the biomechanics of human body motion. You can incorporate the joints, the skeletons, and everything like that, and computer simulate them for you. I thought, well, that sounds like a good plan. And while we're at it, he started teaching me about things from day one, from hour one. The first thing he got on me was about the classes I was taking. Now, mind you, classes had already started. I was, just meeting him between classes. He said, Gary, Professor Tom Kane is teaching his class on dynamics. It is highly recommended. I sat back in my chair, crossed my arms, probably did all the defensive mechanisms and said, Felix, I was an undergraduate physics major. I also went to Caltech and MIT. I studied dynamics at both institutions at undergraduate and graduate level course, taking my last class from a world-renowned dynamicist. And then I worked in high-energy particle physics for 3.5 years at the Lawrence Livermore Laboratory. I don't need any more dynamics. He got up on the desk, leaned forward, put his face about a foot from mine and said, Gary, it is highly recommended. I just threw up my arms and said, all right, if it's that important to you, I'll do it. But I'm telling you, I don't need any more dynamics. It was the best advice I ever had. That very first hour I met with him. That course revolutionized my life. It taught me about dynamics in a whole new way. You see, Stanford was doing things in those days. They were taking old things and doing them in new ways that no one had ever seen before. And that occurred with dynamics. I was able to apply that to my research method and able to carve out things, my own research niche, and it just led to all kinds of things, including a whole new book that just described all the research methods that we developed just from our research group at Stanford. It set the course of my career for the next 40 years in that first meeting I had with him. Now, Felix wasn't the kind of guy who would go around telling his graduate students what to do. In fact, the most familiar refrain heard amongst his graduate students was, I wish that man would just tell me what to do. But alas, he never would. What he told me was, well, Gary, show me that you're worth keeping. Find a problem, solve it, write a paper, and then we'll see. Okay, so I set about doing that. I tried to figure out what problem to solve. And the thing is that he also gave you only a year to do that. Well, the first 6 months of my year were spent just trying to figure out what to do. I read every paper I could. I talked to all the other graduate students. I talked to all the professors. I researched. I went to conferences. I went on surgical rounds, everything, trying to figure out what problem to solve. Finally, it came to me. The knee. It's a very complex joint, 3 bones, lots of different contact points. There's a patella in there. It changes how the joint operates. It has a moving axis of rotation, and the axis doesn't stay fixed in its orientation either. Very complex joint. I decided, why don't I do the knee? I've got 6 months left. Surely I can solve the knee problem. Well, I at least got the handle of it. But when it came time to presenting the work and writing it down, Felix and I just butted heads time after time. Many times we got in that position where he was up on the desk, facing me like that. And I learned to also get up on the desk facing him and say, no, I think we should do it this way. One day he finally, exasperated at me, just threw up his arms and said, Gary, you just need to cut everything. Start from a blank sheet of paper and give me an outline in a half page. Tell me what it is you're trying to say. Just put down the salient points. We fought over that outline for at least a month. But by the end of that time, we had cleaned it up and made the most concise, logical, ordered presentation possible. It was just an outline, but we had slaved over that. We had spilled blood over it. The good thing about that process was that he taught me that the way I solved problems was intuitive. And to be accepted in a scientific community, it had to be presented in a deductive, orderly fashion. He trained me how to think that way. We expanded that paper, fleshed it out, made transition paragraphs, and voila, a paper that was clear and concise and accepted without any modifications on the first try. Unheard of thing. When I look back on my years with Felix, it really underscored. Is that a red light? No. Okay, it's a green light. Oh, wonderful. Lots of time. Okay, the influx of ideas are just coming too fast. Okay. So I began to really appreciate all that he had done for me. He helped me to refine the way I thought, enabled me to create a way of presenting my work in a way that would be accepted. And together, with our research group, we changed the world of biomechanics. Thank you very much.